Hello, and welcome to the Bold Leadership Stories Show, where we talk about experiences shaping exceptional lives. And today I've got the distinct pleasure of having an opportunity to chat with Kristine Garcia. And Kristine, thank you for joining me today on the
Thank
show.
you for having me.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Let me introduce you here real quick. Kristine Garcia is a licensed real estate broker and a mortgage loan originator with over 2 decades of experience in residential, commercial, construction to permanent, new home, and land financing. Additionally, Kristine has a background in residential real estate investment. Her particular business structure allows her to operate in all-in-one real estate resource for her clients. I'd like to learn more about that, Kristine. And she holds a graduate degree in leadership and organizational studies from Azusa Pacific University. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jim. It's an honor to be numbered amongst the guests that you've been able to interview, especially considering some of your recent guests, which I enjoyed very much.
Oh, well, very good. Thank you. And thank you for subscribing and sharing the show. It keeps us going.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you right off the bat a question about what makes you unique in your career. Uh, I see that you've got an all-in-one real estate resource for your clients. What is that, and why is it important?
Well, in this industry, fortunately in California, I'm allowed to hold a real estate broker license as well as a mortgage originator license, which means that I am able to take care of the mortgage loan as well as real estate sales and purchases.
Uh-huh.
And in that situation, because both sides of real estate, both the real estate and the loans are so numbers driven, it really allows for a client to have a direct access, single individual who's able to anticipate needs, answer questions, basically inventory all of the aspects of the numbers before a transaction even gets going in
Mhm.
order to really reduce the amount of exposure risk that a buyer might have if they were relying on information that they may or may not know they need from trying to obtain it from one party, but thinking that maybe the other party would share it with them and not knowing who's on first, who's on second, who's responsible to make this information known to a buyer. And in this industry, there are times where it's a full steam ahead, get them into contract, keep it moving, get to the closing table. And I like to tell people it's better to catch up than clean up. And so I like to really
Okay.
be, I like to be anticipatory of those things because I am the subject matter expert. And so they're counting on me to be able to share that with them. And by having just one single individual as a point of contact, that reduces the chances that something might be lost in the cracks or just go by the wayside.
Okay. So from my experience, you have sometimes you've got a buyer's agent and you've got a seller's agent. So you got two people that are, or two groups of people that are buying and selling a property. And then you've got the loan agent. So there's potentially three people in the mix. And the communication, sometimes things don't go just right. And you end up getting these people pointing at each other and you're stuck in the middle and you're like, what do I do? Because you don't do this every day.
No,
Right.
that's
So, and
that's the great point in it.
there's a lot of, money involved in a lot of cases. And timing is
It can
important.
be destructive too. It can be destructive if people don't really have things thought through in advance or they don't have the knowledge to make the decision on it and they're counting on the professional.
Right.
The outcome can change their financial outcome potentially for the rest of their life.
Right. So which part of those are you taking, the buyer's agent and the seller's agent and the mortgage loan agent in the
Well, that
same,
would be
are
a
you in all
rare,
in one package?
that's a rare opportunity. That's a rare circumstance where there's a willing buyer, willing seller.
Uh-huh.
That's a dual agency situation
Right.
when it comes to real estate. So it's very rare that we have those present themselves, they can present themselves. But when I act as a loan agent, I'll either act as a loan agent in a refinance situation where the client already owns the property, or in a
Mhm.
purchase situation where I'm assisting them purchase the property. However, if I'm acting as the listing agent, then I have some unique skills and knowledge that if a listing agent doesn't have that type of background in lending, they may not catch certain things. They'd have to rely on their lender to look at it, which they don't always, a listing agent doesn't always speak with one of their regular lenders that they use about contracts that come in or details within a transaction. So, but
So
there
give
are
me an
times that,
example of that, if you could.
so I recently had a transaction where I had a listing and the buyer, there was a buyer that was going to make an offer through their agent, and their agent mentioned that they had an FHA buyer. And I said, well, you may want to speak with your loan officer or your loan originator about this, because this property actually qualifies for USDA financing, which would eliminate the mortgage insurance situation for them.
Okay,
And
the PMI, which could be significant every month.
significant. Yes. And because of that, I was able to share that with them. I also had a transaction where the buyer requested a significant amount of credit for closing costs. And
Mhm.
then they also noted that they wanted funds for a buy down. And they were in two sections of the contract
So a
that
buy down is when you buy the interest rate of the mortgage to a lower rate, correct?
exactly.
Okay.
Now, this is a serious contractual obligation if the seller were to agree to it, and there would be a misunderstanding about what portions were going to buy down the interest rate and which
Mhm.
portions were just going to regular closing costs. A misunderstanding about that could cost a seller a significant amount of money. There are also times when it's pretty clear that there are some fees associated with the loan that the seller should not participate in order to make the transaction happen. And so that unique skill set allows for me to be able to save clients quite a bit of money. And I enjoy being able to do those things for people, because this is a situation where typically there's usually one or two clients,
Mhm.
two individuals involved in a transaction where I am their real estate broker or their loan originator. There are times where there's three or four people in the same transaction. It's not often, but it does happen. And
Mhm.
so we think a lot of times of leadership as being a leader of a large group, being, say, a leader of a platoon in the military, or being a leader in corporate America of a sales team and such. But one of the things that's very important in my industry is that this is maybe a small group of just two people, in which there's the client and myself, the loan originator, or the client, myself, the real estate broker, or two clients and myself. So it's just a party of two or party of three. But that's still a leadership situation, because they're counting on me to be the subject matter expert, both in the financing as well as in the real estate. And so it's my responsibility it's their choice in everything they do, but it's my responsibility to serve them by giving them information and anticipating certain things that come up, and by being extremely vigilant about all aspects of a transaction to try to make sure that their outcome is the very best possible outcome that they have been entrusting my services for. And so some people may never even see those little aspects of what's involved in it, but I know what those are.
Mhm.
And the leadership party of two or party of three in a transaction is incredibly important, because of the type of implications that homeownership has on the average person.
Okay. So, um, can you put that into some numbers for me? What would that look like in terms of, the difference between what you're bringing to the table and someone else who doesn't have your skills and your knowledge?
Well, I
What
would
could that
say,
cost someone over the lifetime of a loan, say 30 years?
oh, it could be in all sorts of areas. It can be within the financing. It can be within an individual opening themselves up to certain lawsuits. when they
Okay.
sell a home, or even when they buy a home. And so this is one of the main things
So it's
that are
getting
main
getting
aspects.
the structure of the deal set up so that it ends up being a win-win for everybody. Win-win-win all the way
Right.
around.
Well, we want winning outcomes. So there's a certain aspect of real estate that it's about knowledge.
Mhm.
And whether that's in the finance or in real estate sales or purchases. And so one aspect I would say of myself, just right across the board is what we've already talked about, is having a finance background as well as a real estate background. And being an all-in-one real estate resource means that there's a significant amount of knowledge there that exists in order to make the very best outcomes for people, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And the additional aspect is that all leaders everywhere have to be subject matter experts in all aspects of what they do. So, for
You have
example,
a fiduciary responsibility as well, a legal fiduciary
yes,
responsibility.
yep, I have a fiduciary responsibility to the principal in the transaction,
Uh-huh.
which really governs every aspect of conduct in real estate. And that could be anything from my interaction with the other real estate agent, whether it's a listing situation or a purchase situation. Those are interactions that the client never sees. The principal doesn't necessarily see usually,
Mhm.
but I know that they exist. And
Okay, you can
I
bring
know
that
that
to the table for your client. And that's the benefit of having you working with them then, is that you've got 20 years of experience that you've basically been through every situation multiple times, and you're continually learning and growing and staying current in all of the latest laws and regulations, right? So that's kind of
you read my
what
mind.
that's right. So that's what someone's actually buying or paying for when they bring you into the deal. And it's important
That's true.
not just hire your friend as your agent because they're your friend. You want to find someone who really knows what they're doing, because it could cost you either money or headaches at some point down the road if you don't do it right the first time.
That's very true. And it's a it's one of those situations where this type of position requires a tremendous amount of reading and staying up on what you just said. What are the laws? What are the changes? What
Mhm.
are the nuances? There's a very big, uh, let's say, push or emphasis in real estate on marketing for your next transaction, marketing, 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 marketing. However, in the long haul, one's level of knowledge about the legal aspects and such and risk management aspects for clients is very, very important and needs the kind of attention that a lot of places are giving to marketing.
Mhm.
Because if someone spends all their time simply studying different aspects of marketing or marketing trends, which is good, that and lets that aspect of it go, yes, it can be just something as simple as not properly disclosing something to a buyer and the cost associated with going to court as a result. And I personally believe that the vast majority of things that happen in real estate that are negative are very preventable, very avoidable.
Mhm.
And so it's important that people that sit in my position, being that leader, no different than if they were a leader in a corporation and having to keep up on legal trends and such, risk management trends. It's important for the individual real estate broker or loan originator to stay abreast of those things and advise accordingly, because it does have a difference in what the outcome is 10 times over. And even all the way down to, you asked about what differentiates myself,
Mhm.
is that by being a loan originator in a purchase transaction, I'm able to interview a client and help them figure things out. It's my favorite part of my job, helping people figure things out.
Okay.
And that is to look, for example, we'll look at a situation and maybe we have a first time home buyer that doesn't have a lot of funds available to them. And they may say something like, I'm even willing to buy a quote unquote fixer upper.
Mhm.
Now, I think this is a situation where some decades of experience comes in, and really utilizing good ethics in that leadership position in that transaction, and start to ask the right questions, such as, is this appropriate? Do you think this is going to work out for you? As far
So
as,
you've done
are you going to have?
investing, right? You've bought,
Mhm,
purchased homes for investments, right?
I have.
And also, do you do commercial as well?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you're that's unique too. I mean, not every real estate agent has purchased investment homes or knows about that industry, and
Yes.
how to actually structure a flip in terms of financing. And there's a lot of ways to do that that are not conventional ways, right?
There are.
So I'm thinking that you probably have access to knowledge that many real estate people just don't have because they're not taught and they've never done it.
Having done something yourself is an excellent way of being able to assist others do what it is that you do. And that's important, because that level of knowledge allows me to ask the right questions
Right.
and know what some pitfalls are. Leaders
So if I'm
help
a
others
buyer and
avoid
I'm thinking I'm
pitfalls.
going to get I want to buy I want to spend less on the home. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to buy a fixer upper, right?
Right.
So what would you say would be your questions that you'd ask, basic questions that you'd want to ask the buyer to kind of get an idea of your comfort level of them getting into this and not walking into a disaster?
Well, I think we've all seen the movie Money Pit.
Right? Okay.
And
Yeah.
and there are times where certain loans and certain home purchases and certain investments are not appropriate for people.
Right.
And so if I find it doesn't matter who's buying, first time home buyer, second, third experience, I'm going to ask certain questions to try to be sure that I have understood the person. Seek first to understand and then be understood, as the great Stephen Covey's line.
Right.
And so if I see some things that are of concern, I first like to assure people, we're going to meet your objective. I don't want you to be worried about that. Let's talk about this fixer-upper situation. Tell me, do you have people in your family that are good in construction? Do you have any experience in some DIY projects? And as a loan originator, I have the unique opportunity of kind of having a good idea of what type of funds do they have available. If I have a first-time home buyer that's buying a property and it's a fixer-upper,
Mhm.
and they don't have any extra funds after this closes, then that fixer-upper situation may not necessarily be the best outcome for them if they're going to find themselves in a situation where are the extra funds going to come from to do that fixing up? What
Mhm.
is that? Do we have resources? Do we have family members? Do we have friends? What are the resources to help an individual be able to accomplish that goal? Because I have seen circumstances that I've helped resolve after the fact of people that had agents that were the concern becomes, are people more concerned about their commissions than they are matching up a client with a property that's going to work for them? And that does
Right.
happen.
Oh
There are a lot
yeah.
of victims out there of that. And I've had situations where I've walked in and I've known this was not the house that they were ever supposed to buy. And so we have to provide solutions for that. And then on the other side of that, just try to make sure that, depending on people's lifestyles, there are some people who work excessive number of hours and don't really have a lot of time for those DIY projects.
Mm.
So it's important to be able to ask the questions that and look and anticipate the circumstances. And if they don't seem to match up well for either the financials of the client, or maybe the timing of the client, or uh, what their interests are, or where they have to appropriate their resources and time for, that's very important. And that really comes from a long time of looking things over and experiencing things yourself. That's not to say that somebody newer in the industry isn't capable of doing those things, because there are people who have really honed those skills. But
Mhm.
those are the important aspects of that small group leadership in which I'm serving somebody.
Sure. Well, what comes to mind is buying a residential property. The way that I've learned when you're buying a home to live in, a lot of people consider it an asset. Say, well, that's an asset because it's going to appreciate and it's something that I'm going to have later for my retirement. Okay. But my definition that I learned of an asset is something that puts money in your pocket now. And a home doesn't do that. A home, every month, you're putting money out. And it's not putting money in your pocket. It's going the other way. Maybe eventually it will, maybe. But there's no guarantee. Whereas an asset, if you buy it right, will be putting money in your pocket from day one or very soon after day one. And you have a plan for that. And you look at a purchase as a business from a business perspective and not from an emotional perspective, right? When you're buying a residence that you're going to live in with your family, there's a lot of emotion there because it's got to be comfortable, it's got to be home, and that's not an investment. That investment.
I couldn't agree more.
So I mean, that's what I learned and it sounds like you have that perspective. Am I right?
I do. I agree with you on both of those statements because I'm sure we might have both experienced some of the great writings of Robert Kiyosaki.
Yes.
Who explains that very clearly for people.
Yes.
So I like to tell people
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yes. And the many, many books that I tell people all the time that are looking at getting into real estate investing and such, to be sure to read those books. Make that a point to go through all of his books more than one time and listen to his podcast, listen to his YouTube channel or YouTube interviews and such. So I agree with you. Buying your own personal home, I feel the same way. It's not an asset in the same way that a property that has a return on investment has. And so the cost needs to be reasonable and budgeted for.
Right.
And it's important to have those conversations with clients about what is comfortable to them, because it's one thing for what they qualify for, which our job is to provide what they qualify for, but it's also to be certain that an individual is able to proceed with their life that their ideals in this home, that they can realize them in all aspects. And those are a lot of conversations that need to be had. And one of the part that I'm responsible for in the process is when I do identify. I'm happy when people get excited about something, but I also want to make sure that the excitement doesn't cloud their judgment.
Right.
Emotions cloud our judgment, whether the emotions are good or bad. And so it's really important that we continue to look at things from a non-emotional standpoint, make sure that it checks all the boxes, and that whatever the unique circumstances are that we've gone through and really determined if that's an okay long-term fit. But at the same time, it is still a business decision. Even though it's not a producing asset, it absolutely is a business decision. Yeah. And it's not just a short-term decision, it's a long-term decision. Yeah. Because there's a lot of people that get sold on this idea, rates are up right now, but just buy a house, you can refinance it later. And I like to tell people, I wish I knew where they got their crystal ball from.
Right. Yeah,
because whatever you buy now,
there's all kinds of ways to refinance, and there's all kinds of market conditions that make it advantageous or sometimes impossible to do.
That's exactly right. And so
timing may not work out for you.
That's precise. And a person in my position needs to be very careful that they have advised that individual accordingly. If I have someone that says to me, my uncle told me not to worry, I could just refinance later, I like to tell them it's important to me that you make a purchase now based on the information that we have now, and that you're happy with that even if you never refinanced for 30 years, if that's still okay for you.
So having that kind of integrity, what personal price have you had to pay to have that integrity, to have that ability to be that forthright with your clients? I know
Very,
some real estate houses, I mean, I used to sell real estate. I used to do loans and stuff. So I know a little bit about it, and I've done some investing and studies investing. And so in commercial and residential. So I know enough to be dangerous. I know enough now to say, hey, you've got to really plan this out, and you've got to look at what the risks are and have the right people on your team. And real estate is a team sport. It's not something you just go into by yourself and say, I'm going to do everything and I'm going to, I'll be okay. It doesn't work that way. There's so many facets that you can bring people in that are really good at what they do, and they get paid on the deal. So you have to structure the deal so that everybody wins. And there's ways to do it and there's ways not to do it. And so it's important to bring people in that have the experience. And it sounds like you're someone that I'd want on my team because you've got that, the whole picture, and you're ethical. Some real estate houses are like, turn and burn. I got to get the commissions in, get the deal, sell the house, move on. And it sounds to me like you're doing it more pragmatically and long term. You're looking for relationships.
that's exactly right. And I still receive phone calls from people that were clients in my very, very early stages of my career. I still do work for them. And to me, that is so satisfying in that, is there a price that we pay? I feel there's a greater gain by having this approach, because you see, people operate off of instinct, and their instinct tells them that you're different, that you have their interest in mind. And on my side of the situation, of the equation, I feel strongly that a good name is above riches. And the reason I believe that is because a good name will allow you to build a business, earn income, and help a lot of people and make a difference. See, I'm not a doctor. I don't get to heal people. I am not a police officer. I don't get to save people in their time of need. I'm not a firefighter, and I don't get to rescue people from burning buildings. But what I do, I see it as something that's important to their life, because they say home is where the heart is. And not just for the homeowner that's occupying the property, but also for people who want to build a portfolio of real estate. It's important because they're not just always just buying that for themselves. A lot of times they're buying that to pass that down to the next generation. They're planting trees for posterity, to take a page out of Thomas Jefferson's book. Mm-hmm. And so everything I do, I want to have the same thing when I seek advice or when I'm looking for assistance. I am looking to give the same type of advice that I'm looking for when I need assistance in something, when it has to do, say, with an investment or something like that. And so I want that long-term relationship. It's a great joy to have that. There will be times where some people will not necessarily like your ideas. They may want to go full steam ahead in something, and the words hurry up and wait don't work for them.
Right.
Let's evaluate the situation a little bit more. Things are fluid. Let's do a little strategic planning. And those people will typically fall off and go their own way. But oftentimes they also come back afterwards. And so I always like to make sure, well, when they have a problem, maybe they get in over their head, or maybe they got overly excited about a property that someone else showed them because they maybe liked what they had to say or something maybe they met at a birthday party or something, and somebody was able to hook them real quick and try to go, meet with them the next day and take them, and people get excited.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they come back because they feel off of their instinct that there was something different about what I might have had to say to them. And that's why I like to leave the door open, because maybe that's when they need you the most.
Right. Yeah. That's beautiful. it's it's as you get into, you mentioned working with clients to create a legacy and a portfolio that they can pass along to future generations. Tell me a little bit about that. How do you work that, structure that into the program?
Well, I think the first thing I like to do is I like to share with people that there are a variety of ways that individuals can make money in real estate. I feel that if people have lots of options and lots of information, then they may identify with something that they're most comfortable and most interested in.
Mhm.
Some people have a tolerance for a lot of risk, and some people don't have tolerance for a lot of risk. And so depending on the approach they take will depend on what they're comfortable with will depend on what approach they take. So matching people up with that sort of approach is an important thing.
Mhm.
And so I may offer 3 or 4 ideas that are of no interest, but the fifth one is exactly a fit. And I like to say, well, we kiss all the toads because if you kiss a lot of toads,
What was it?
you'll
You would
find
kick all the toads?
we kiss all the toads because if you've heard sometimes hearing about what you're not interested in only solidifies what you're most interested in.
Okay.
So I like to offer lots of different um, avenues or approaches or possibilities to people so that they can think about things and decide if they want to go that route because nobody can guarantee another person what the market's going to be like a year from now or what it's going to be like 10 years from now. What are the different things that are going to intersect into the industry that might affect that? Um, so the more information that they receive about what they might be able to do, then they can identify and then we can continue the conversation from there. And some things will really resonate with some people. Some things won't. Some will just be, maybe I need to chew on this a little bit more and think about it. And I can share not only things that I've done, um, but I can also share things that my other clients have been successful at.
Great. Kristine, what was it that you have a vast array of tools and techniques and knowledge, strategies that then I think that then from what I've experienced to be the average real estate agent or even broker. Um, what was it that started your interest in being that good?
I'm hopelessly curious. And I very much, I'm compelled to evaluate information, to add to my both my breadth and depth of knowledge.
Hmm.
And so as a result, I am always looking for resources to continue investigating and continue adding to my database of knowledge,
Right.
really. And there are so many talented people in and around this industry that there's no end to the amount. If anything, I find myself frustrated that I don't have enough time to consume all of it in one shot.
Hmm.
And so I have to pace myself in order to continue to take that information in because one bit of information can result in a better outcome for a client. And if I can just get that one nugget and add that to the library, I may not use it today, but if I use it 5 months from now, 6 months, 2 years from now, and I'm able to do that and make the outcome excellent for that individual or avoid a pitfall, I'm very driven to continue to absorb that information from the others that are in and around and servicing the industry.
Very good. So let's switch gears for a little bit. What do you
Sure.
do for fun?
Well, I love to travel.
Okay.
I love culture. I love history. And so I love to visit different places that I'm able to mesh culture and um, different interests like that. I love to read and I like to read on a variety of topics.
Cool.
And I love dogs.
You love dogs. What do you have a dog now?
I have four, four
You have
small dogs.
4 small dogs.
Yes, I
Wow.
do.
That's cool. I've got where I'm at now, we've got 3 cats, and I'm a dog person. So I'm learning to like cats. Actually, they're pretty cool, but I'm still a dog person.
We have one cat. My daughter has a cat and has had a cat for about 12 years. And they're just unique creatures. They have their own personalities. They're very different from dogs. But I think I'm probably drawn to dogs because dogs have a certain sort of faithfulness that's uncommon.
Hmm.
And the capacity to love dogs just continues to grow in my life. And then even when I travel, I take pictures of dogs when I
Yeah,
travel,
you put them
and
up
then
on
I'll make a
Facebook.
photo album and I'll put the picture of the dog in my photo album, and it might be the dogs of Italy, and they're just included in the photo album.
Uh, yeah, well, that's cool. They're family. I've had dogs in my life that that, like when I was growing up, we had a German Shepherd, and she was my best friend. I had friends come and go, but that my buddy Gretchen, she was there all the time, and I had her trained to for hand signals. And I was a teenager. I mean, I didn't know anything, but she was so smart. She figured stuff out, and we'd go on walks all the time, and she was always there. And every time I'd come home, she'd be so happy to see me. It was like, I
We
like
could learn a
this.
lot from dogs. We can learn a lot from dogs, really.
Yeah.
And I feel that animals in general are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. I should add something as well that I do think is important is I do feel that community is important.
Mm.
And for myself, being a Marine Corps wife, my husband served active duty in the Marine Corps and
Thank you
then
for your
served
service.
reserve. Yes, absolutely. And it was one of my greatest prides in life was to be able to say I'm a Marine Corps wife. And so I love our veterans. I've had a heart for veterans since even before I met my husband. Um, our veterans are a national treasure to us. And so I've had the privilege of being involved with both organizations, Veterans Foreign Wars, VFW, and
Mm.
American Legion. And that's another something that I participate in that when you say, what do you do for fun? Well, that's fun, but there's a lot of really great opportunities pertaining to serving our veterans and their families. And so
Mm.
that's another thing that I very much enjoy. And I think it's important to be around people of wisdom that have had those experiences. And so those are two organizations that are near and dear to my heart.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's finding finding your purpose, and there's joy there. Wouldn't you agree?
I would. I like the book. I'm sure you've read it. Finding Your Why.
Oh,
I think
yes,
it's
I
called,
haven't seen it. Yeah.
yes. And I happen to serve a lot of veterans, both in real estate and loans. And it's just such an opportunity to serve people that have served the country and to know that I'm able to do something for them
Mm.
and to watch out for things for them, to take care of their needs in that area of real estate and loans and to be involved in their lives subsequently. And so serving veterans in my industry has been a great joy. I actually was able to attend a ringing of the bell at the New York Stock Exchange.
Oh,
I
very
was
cool. That's
I was
fun.
invited as a guest of
The ding, 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 as you
yes,
stand up on, yeah, that's
yeah,
cool.
a very large wholesale mortgage lender invited me to go there. Myself and a number of other brokers that basically shared our stories with the organization about what we were able to do with UWM for our clients. And
Story.
immediately
You
when
got
I,
my attention. Do you have a story to tell?
it's a fabulous story. Immediately when I saw the email, immediately I thought of the veterans because at that time, the VA rates had just plummeted, and it was saving veterans so much money on their mortgage payments.
When was this?
And
What year?
this in 2020, and they remained
Oh, recent.
low.
Okay.
2020, 2021, they started creeping up in 2022. They're still a great loan program, but within the contest is really what it was. I just wrote all about my veterans, and I said thank you to this company for being a leader in offering great low interest rates for veterans on VA loans,
Mhm.
and um, just shared a little bit of my work with that. And I emailed it in, sent it in, and I thought nothing of it because I didn't think that it really particularly felt, it didn't feel like it fit exactly what they were asking for in the contest.
Okay.
So I
But it
didn't
came from your
expect,
heart, right? It was like
oh,
it was just so, it sounds like it was just a natural thing to do for you.
yes, yes. And I thought nothing else of it. So a few weeks later, I booked some tickets. I was going to go on a vacation to Tennessee, and I was going to start up north and then travel down to Tennessee, uh, and to see great parts of our country in those areas.
Hmm.
And one morning I woke up and checked my email, and it said, "You're going to New York City." And
Wow.
I said, "What?" And sure enough, and I had the opportunity to shake hands with the CEO of that company and thank him for really putting the needs of veterans first and being committed, really being committed to that loan program that is so great for veterans.
Mm.
And he it seemed like he must have remembered the story to some degree because he immediately acknowledged it and chatted for a few minutes and then continued on with it was a great privilege to be able to do that. And when I went, I really felt that I was representing the veterans when I had a chance to go. And my husband accompanied me on that trip, and he
Hmm.
himself is a United States Marine Corps veteran. It was a great honor. And
What did your
those are
husband do
some
in the Marine Corps?
uh he was a communicator in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
So he was a radio wireman,
Uh-huh.
and to me it was interesting because that I really felt that I was there really just representing the veterans, even though it was only in my heart, not necessarily publicly. But those are some of the benefits that when you're serving people and excited about it and excited
Hmm.
for their outcomes, sometimes all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, oh my goodness, I got to do this. First of all, I got to serve all these veterans, and they trusted me with their loans. And then I also got to do this because I had an opportunity to serve them. Too many times people are counting what's in it for them when they should just do the job and everything else will come. And I always tell people that are new to the industry, well, what's the secret to success? Serve people. Everything else comes after that.
Mm.
Everything. You don't even have to
Beautiful.
worry about anything. If your mind is to serve people, you will serve them. If your mind is to serve yourself, you might find yourself in a different career pretty soon.
Yeah, good advice. You mentioned, Kristine, that you were interested in several hobbies and interests, and one of them that caught my attention was history. What part of history are you a buff of?
I'm so glad you asked. I love to share this with people. First, as a small child, I was very interested in the late Queen Elizabeth II
Okay.
and um, all things English. And so it started there.
Have you ever been
And
to
I,
England?
a few times, yes, I've had
Okay.
the privilege. And in fact, when Her Majesty was still living, she was visiting Balmoral. So at that time, she opened up Buckingham Palace, and it was I think it was her 80th birthday, and
Okay.
she put on display 80 of her dresses
Wow.
and a number of different of her personal jewelry collection.
Mm.
And of course, every girl loves to watch that. And so we were the lucky last four tickets that were purchased right there in front of Buckingham Palace the year that I went. And so the thing about Queen Elizabeth was she had a tremendous history and life of leading and
Hmm.
in such a dignified fashion. And, as a female in business, I really enjoyed watching her, and I enjoy watching her example and seeing her have a family and do different things. And so it's difficult to have an interest in English history without then developing an interest in all European history.
Hmm.
um, there's a lot of interrelatedness there, and it does directly affect, much of the world and much of America. And there's quite a bit to see, and there's a lot of documentaries and a lot of good information. And so I have just always, I've enjoyed European history for a long, long time. However, I just all cultures in general, I really enjoy. So I actually have a very long, it's a fold out that documents history from the beginning of documented history to current. And it
Mhm.
follows
Must be
different,
pretty long.
it is quite long. It's longer than the room that I'm in. So I enjoy it because it will show what was happening in different parts of the world, what might have been happening in China under one dynasty and what was happening in Europe at the same time, but yet what was happening in Latin America. So for example, I've spent time in Latin America, which I very much enjoy.
Where'd you go?
Um, I've spent time in Peru. I had a roommate that was her parents were missionaries in Peru, and I
Uh-huh.
had an opportunity to go and visit there and work on a team that was doing some construction work and such, and did some dental clinics and things like that. And it it's I was rather young at the time. I was 18, 19 years old when I did this, but even prior to that, I would do some different. I would go with some different organizations to say Mexico and things like that. And
Mhm.
so I've enjoyed being able to do some work like that in Latin America. And so I have an interest in that as well.
Mhm.
I'm a self-taught Spanish speaker, and I learned to speak Spanish just sheerly out of enjoying the people. And so I learned to read and write in Spanish. And eventually I married someone with a Latino background.
Mhm.
And so I like to travel in Latin America as well. And I really love going places I can speak the language.
For
That's
sure.
always fun
Yeah.
to go somewhere else and say,
Well, it's
I understand everything.
a lot more
So,
fun. Meet
so
the people.
I enjoy all the history because, the entire world has example of great leaders, and the world has example of not so great leaders, and we can learn from both sides of it. But I enjoy this foldout that I have because it will tell me what was going on in different parts of the world all at the same time. So
Yeah.
wherever I travel, I do like to see historical points of interest.
Yeah, very good. Both my parents were English majors, and history was a big part of my upbringing. We had my dad built a library. We had books. It was Google before Google in my house. Very fortunate to have that resource. But it's like he had a full set of National Geographics from like the early 1900s, 1901, 1902, I think is, they started there and then went current. I mean, huge uh, pile of those neatly organized. And I got to go through a lot of that. And I learned so much. Uh,
Amazing publication, National Geographic.
yeah, it was
I
really,
spent a lot of time with my nose buried in those as well. My mother
yeah,
collected them for a long period of time.
yeah, you
They
don't
they
get that
were a great
anymore.
publication. No, not
Yeah,
so much. It's unfortunate. I being a curious girl, I do you remember World Book Encyclopedia
sure. Yeah, we had Britannicas.
and Britannicas?
Yeah.
Yeah, those were
And
great. I always loved those.
yeah, I had to, even when I was little, I mean, we had, the pages were so thin on those Britannicas and the writing was really small, but you could literally, it was Google before Google. I mean, I could go into those books and find an answer to anything. And it was amazing. I'd spent hours in there just on my own, just going, looking at things. And it's
Summer
all,
vacation.
right?
Yeah,
So,
we're dating ourselves now. We're
I
dating
know, but
ourselves.
that's okay. I'm 65, so I'm beyond that now. It's like I'm just old.
I had to show those to my children in an antique store one time. I said, if you
Okay.
want to know how I spent my summers, turn to page 163 of the letter M.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yep. No, I
Gosh.
love it.
Yeah. I remember when I was in high school, I had a calculator for math, and I took my kids later to see to a museum up in San Francisco, and we went into the electronics museum part, and my calculator was in the museum. The one that I had in high school was actually on display. It's like, no, I'm not that old. Yeah, but
Well, it's an oldie but a goodie.
yeah, crazy.
I must say I do love museums. My father took us to museums. We used to go to a museum in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is where I was born.
Okay.
And I could see the same stuff over and over and over, but I always enjoyed it. I will say though, as a small child, I was very scared of the mummy area. That did scare me though. So,
Yeah. How come? What was it about the mummies that scared you?
well, now that I'm a little bit older, they don't scare me as much. But as a very small child, I don't know if it was just that we were always running ahead of my dad and getting
Okay.
through the
You're like,
museum.
whoa, where am I at?
And the room was really dark, I
Yeah.
suppose to preserve the
There's
mummy
dead
or maybe
people.
the effect. And it had its effect on me, believe me. So I found myself in the mummy room all by myself and
That
just kept on
would be
moving.
scary.
Yeah, I've been to some museums that have mummies since, and it's been okay. But I always remember that mummy room in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But that's the thing about we have such great museums in California and throughout the
Mhm.
country. And I'm also a library lover. I in high school I took a class called library science.
Mhm.
And there was a Dewey Decimal System back then, and I learned how to bind books or actually repair books and such. And I love the library. I actually have an odd practice in that I only keep a handful of books
Mhm.
that I have purchased because I like to give them away. If I'm not, I donate them to the library
Oh,
or
I've
I'll share them.
donated tons of books too. Yeah.
I feel guilty if they're collecting dust on my
Yeah.
bookshelf when the library is an opportunity for everybody that sets foot in one of we have great libraries in this country, and people that take advantage of that, you can step into a library and it's endless learning,
Yep.
endless opportunity to learn with
Yep.
it for the cost of a library card, which I think is still free, right?
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great privilege to be able to um, know that we live in a land. As a small child, I used to go to the library. It was there in Cascade Township in Michigan, Grand Rapids,
Mhm.
Michigan, and I loved the library as a child, and I love
My
it
dad
today.
used to take me on Wednesday nights during the week after he'd get back from work. He'd worked all day, and he'd say, "Well, every Wednesday we'd go to the library and spend an hour or two and just browse." I mean, it didn't matter to him what I read as long as I was looking at something. And it got me in the habit of reading. And he
Yes,
also after that every time we'd go to like 31 ice cream or something, get ice cream cone. And it was great dad time too. So that
great memories, right?
great
Great,
great memories, great
right. And
habit to
something
get
as
into.
simple,
Yeah.
simple thing like that, and here you are recalling it these years later. And the love for books is an important thing because if we keep reading and we continue to be lifelong learners, then that's
Mhm.
something that nobody can take away from us, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And and you're still every day you're learning something new, right?
Yes, and of course, needless to say,
With joy.
it's with joy. And if I'm not reading a book at night, I might have Audible on in the background. The
Mhm.
resources are endless. In order to better ourselves. It's fun, of course. Reading is fun, like the little mantra. I
Sure.
think when I grew up, but it allows us to see things from different perspectives and experience things that we might not necessarily experience, and to be able to understand one another better, because that's a great introduction to many worlds and to see what life was like at different times, what life is like for other people now. And if we're able to learn from history, that's a great thing. And yes, it betters it can better our character. It can cause us to think more broadly, and it can
Mhm.
cause us to be better for others as well. So, books are magical, really. They really are. And publications and all things like that, which is why I love podcasts. I'm sure you noticed I was keenly interested in what you had to say the first night that we met,
Yeah.
because there's so much to learn from others. It's endless,
It's
truly
endless.
endless. We can continue to better ourselves.
Remember a quick little story, and then I've got one final question. Our time's, wow, this is going really fast. Um, the My dad growing up, we lived up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he used to get 5 newspapers from the Bay Area. And I got, he'd done that for years, and I don't know, I was like 12 or 13 years old, and I started looking at these newspapers and I started reading them. And looking at them saying, okay, this is cool. The Green Sheet and the Oakland Tribune and the San Francisco Examiner and the San Jose Mercury News, and the different newspapers that were up there, and looking at the different stories, and it's like, these are all the same stories pretty much. And I asked him one day, Dad, why do you get 5 newspapers? They're all the same. And he goes, great question. He says, I look at the opinions, and sometimes I read, if I'm interested in a particular subject, I'll go into those 5 newspapers and I'll read the different opinions that different people have from their different perspectives about that subject. And I'll
Brilliant.
get to know what their concerns are and what they're thinking about that subject. And then I make up my own mind.
Yes.
And then I have my opinion, and I base it on the knowledge that I'm getting from people who are immersed in it in different ways. And I know their agendas because I read them on a consistent basis. So I know that they have their own bias and their own agenda, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I know what it is. So I can balance my decision based on what I believe, on what their input is, and then make my decision from that. And then I stick to that decision because I know with confidence what that is. And so
I love
think
that.
that's a strategy that is still important today too. I pass it on. But
that's brilliant. I mean, the founding of a nation was based on that sort of approach.
yeah,
And that's really the definition of intellectualism. And I always tell people I'm willing to listen to anything, because I'm either going to add to my knowledge. I may change my opinion, which is helpful, or it may cause me to further strengthen the opinion that I have. But it is my responsibility as an individual to keenly look at all sides of it, so that therefore I am well-rounded in my approach in any situation. So bravo to your dad.
yeah, I'm very blessed to have that experience in my life and be able to pass that on today, because I find so many people now, they get fed their information from 1 or 2 places that are, they're biased in a certain direction, and they don't get the balance, and they're making all their life decisions based on an opinion that may feel good to them, but it may not be the best thing in the long term for themselves or their family.
True. And exposure to a variety of information is important. Whether that's no matter what the topic is. And I try to apply that in my work, and I apply that in my work because of the fact that I think it's important. There's a concept in groups that's known as groupthink.
Right.
And then there's also the power of group decision making. And so that's why I value in any situation, hearing what others have to say and then deciding something from there as a group. And that's one of the great joys in my work, for example, is maybe discussing a loan program or long-term objective or home purchase, or I have a meeting coming up in a couple of days with an individual who's making some serious considerations about relocating and how they are going to do that. And so it's important to be able to sit in a situation and take that exact same concept that your dad was applying while he was reading the paper and taking them to a situation that affects a family's decision making. This family is thinking about moving from one state to another and what the implications are there. Incidentally, I have a large network of people in a lot of different states because of some of my relationships. So they came to the right place as a result. But it's so important to be able to bring up lots of different sides to everything. And the only way to do that is to think like how your dad was thinking.
Mm.
I need to look at all of these things, identify what are the biases, take out what's applicable, and then establish my position from there. And that sort of critical thinking applies to all areas of our life, personal and professional. And so I appreciate you sharing that story about your father. That's wisdom.
Yeah, I agree. I love to pass that on because I think we've lost that to a large degree. Or maybe we never had it. I don't know. I just had it. I've always grown up. But
It's our job to bring it back, right?
yeah,
One person that we reach at a time, one person at a time.
yeah. So one last question. You over your career have made decisions over the length of your, the timeline of your career. And some good decisions, some not so good decisions, maybe. What I'm looking for is to think about your boldest decision and what was it that made it a good decision or maybe a not so good decision, and what were the consequences?
I would say uh, I started out in this industry in lending. And in order to be a lender for the company I wanted to go to work for, which I'm still licensed with them, they're wonderful, very, very brilliant people involved. You had to have a real estate license, Department of Real Estate. And so I obtained a real estate license. Subsequently, I obtained a broker's license not because I needed it or had to have it, but because I wanted to continue to learn and better myself.
Right.
Well, not knowing what good use it was going to come to. And so after 10 years, I think it was about 10 years in lending, I had decided to relocate my family closer to where I went to high school. And I knew that it was at a time in the industry where if I was going to make a change, it was good to make a change then. And I had a client who was a law enforcement officer who has a very busy schedule to this day. And he said to me, he calls me Chris instead of Kristine. Chris, why don't you just do both? That way I can just come to you for everything. And I said, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, I'm moving and I'm making a change in my territory that I had been working in. This might be a good time to go ahead and do just that. I was already exposed to all the forms and intricately involved in real estate transactions. And so I decided that I would go ahead and do that because by then I had a broker's license and I was actually able to do both. So I grabbed a mentor and I went to work in that side of the industry and worked with them. And there's so much compliance and lending that it was very, very easy to pick up on the legal aspects of real estate. I had the licensing for it and the exposure. And so it was a very bold decision to make to completely change the focus of my career because at that point, I wasn't going into real estate offices and in-servicing them and obtaining clients that via that route. There were still real estate agents that liked my work well enough that they worked with me. They referred clients to me on loans because they knew that there were some challenging loans that I was able to do and get done, that I had a lot of knowledge.
Competition.
Well, yes. So of course they were from my previous area that I did a lot of work in, but they knew that my ethics were that I wouldn't, ever, mix the two. So they would call me, even though I was acting as a realtor, call me to do a loan for one of their clients.
Uh-huh.
And so I would do the loan and then refer them back to the agent for real estate and only speak with them about lending. But that was a bold decision to make. But what I had in mind was I wanted to do exactly what that police officer had asked me to do. And it made his life easier to be able just to call me on the phone and speak to change the trajectory of an already successful career. And so I decided to go ahead and do that. I threw, I threw my stone in and I said, let me just give it a try and see how it weighs out in the end. And it was the best decision because I felt like I could really serve my clients in a very detailed fashion and really be able to answer questions and give them information because of the marrying the two up. And it's really proven to help people meet their objectives in ways because I'm fully connected with them. Instead of simply being connected just on the lending side and only advising on that aspect. And the other aspect that's really great is sometimes people will not know if they want to refinance and remodel or if they want to sell and do something different. And I get to give them both sides of the story instead of if I only do one thing, I might persuade them to sell. I
Mhm.
might, it's human nature. Or if I only did lending, I might say, let's talk about a loan. And I really need to meet their objective. And so I felt like it gave me an opportunity to serve people better as a result. And it allowed me to increase my level of knowledge in all aspects of residential, particularly residential real estate.
Mm. So awesome. So let me summarize. I think if and then we'll wrap it up. I want to share my screen. I'm going to bring your website up. So this is your website. And if somebody wants to list their home and or obtain a loan, a mortgage loan for their residence, they can call you,
Absolutely.
correct? Okay. So that's
Yes.
unique. That's really unique in the industry. And then if what about if they're an investor and they're looking for a home to purchase as an investment?
Absolutely. Just the same as if they're looking for their own primary residence. If and here's the other thing I like to offer to people. It's very easy to chat with me, and it's a no obligation conversation. I like to say it's easy peasy. We can schedule a Zoom meeting, sit and chat. That way, I can hear what are your wildest hopes and dreams of what you would like to do in real estate for yourself. Are you just trying to figure out ways to maybe pay your own property off free and clear? Are you looking to obtain other properties to create an income, to create a passive income, supplement your retirement income? Uh, I I like to open the door up. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what it is that you want to do. Um, just chat. And it's not going to result in any sort of let's immediately put a sign out in front of your house. I don't. It doesn't matter to me if this is a plan that you have for the next five, 5, 6 weeks, 5, 6 months, 5, 6 years. Because sometimes people are just they're a little embarrassed to talk about it because they don't know or they're at the very starting point. And so they want to do something, but they don't know what to do, and they're embarrassed to talk about something they are not familiar with, or they don't know, or maybe they just want to see are their ideas um, headed in the right direction.
Mm.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that. One of the areas that I have a really big concern in for people is sometimes people don't have all of the dots connected in their planning, for long-term purposes. And so I like to be able to connect them with people who can help them with that. I have a lot of great people that are able to help them to make those plans legally and put those together for their long-term outcome when they do create a portfolio. Maybe they need some tax structuring from a tax standpoint. What if you know about these things ahead of time? Take all these years of experience, good and bad and
Things like
otherwise.
what, like a LLC or trusts or insurance
Absolutely.
products or anything like
Yes,
that, right?
because although I can't comment on certain aspects because it's prohibited for
Sure.
me to advise somebody legally or from a tax standpoint, I'm able to at least connect the dots and point out things that they need to check on, need to evaluate, be sure they haven't missed, hasn't gone by. And so that they have the information that I've gathered and put together over years and years and years of having my own corporation and having different properties, that they know that stuff ahead of time going into it so that they're equipped with information well in advance because these things matter. And they can determine, is it going to be a short distance to success, or is it going to be a long distance, or am I going to I don't believe there's any hole that you can fall in that's so big you can't figure some way to make it work. A friend of mine says, I either win or I learn. And I agree with that statement
I love
completely.
that. I'm going to steal that one.
And I like to be solution minded. So it's important for people just to have those conversations. And whether it's over coffee or over Zoom, I love coffee. So we can meet for coffee anytime. And we can chat about these things so that people feel that they have somebody that they're comfortable with their ideas. Some people just have ideas that they may be a great idea, but they haven't talked to anybody about it. So maybe they're not acting on it. So I like to be really very accessible to people so they feel comfortable, just as if they were talking to a friend or family member.
Excellent. Well, Kristine Garcia, you are a bold leader in residential real estate, and I appreciate the time you spent with me today. I learned a lot, had fun. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, and I always enjoy seeing you, and I hope it isn't long before I see you again, Jim.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see you around town. It's something going on soon. So thanks again. We'll talk to you in a bit.
Certainly, blessings.
Thank you.
Good night.
You too.